How do you manufacture a population for an empty empire? The official demographic data is a biological impossibility. Today, we audit the human supply chain. 250,000 nameless children shipped by rail, infants manufactured in industrial incubators, and the adults who remembered locked in massive stone asylums. We have the census records and the supply chain they tried to erase. Let's begin. Look at the photograph. It's Paris, Boulevard du Temple. The year is 1838. Look closely at the magnificent stone facades, the perfect sweeping avenues, the towering monuments of a supposedly thriving empire. Now, tell me what is missing. There are no people. The official historians are already screaming the answer. They will tell you it's simply early camera technology, the daguerreotype. They claim the exposure time took 10 to 15 minutes, so anything moving simply didn't register on the plate. It's a comforting answer. It's neat. It makes you feel smart for knowing it. But we are not historians. We are auditors, and we deal in physics. If a bustling Parisian boulevard, filled with hundreds of horse-drawn carriages, merchants, and pedestrians, is recorded for 10 minutes, they don't just disappear. They leave a thermal and visual signature. In photography, it's called the ghosting effect. You would see a dark, blurry river of shadows flowing through the streets. You would see the stationary carts waiting for cargo. You would see horses tethered to posts. You would see the piles of refuse that a living, breathing city generates every single hour. But look again. The streets are pristine. The shadows on the cobblestones are sharp enough to cut glass. There is no blur. There is no ghosting. The city isn't moving too fast to be seen. The city is dead. And it wasn't just Paris. We have the metrics. St. Petersburg in 1850. Empty. Boston in 1860. Empty. Moscow. Dresden. San Francisco. Massive, intricately designed stone megaliths capable of housing millions, standing in absolute, deafening silence. Welcome. Today, Titan Metrics investigates the greatest logistical paradox of the 19th century. We are not looking at the buildings anymore. Today, we audit the population. Because if the old world was empty in 1850, where did you all come from?
To understand a lie, you have to look at the supply chain. And humanity is just another resource. Let's open the official census data, the global population metrics. According to the accepted timeline, it took humanity from the dawn of civilization until the year 1800 to reach 1 billion people. Thousands of years of empires, agriculture, and expansion. 1 billion. But then a statistical anomaly occurs. A glitch in the matrix of biology. Suddenly, without modern antibiotics, without industrial agriculture, during a century plagued by cholera, tuberculosis, and global warfare, the population graph doesn't just curve upward. It goes vertical. By 1920, we hit 2 billion. By 1960, 3 billion. The historians tell us this was the Industrial Revolution. Better hygiene, better food. Let's run the math on that hygiene. In the mid-19th century, infant mortality in major cities like London and New York was staggering. Before the age of 5, nearly 40% of children did not survive. 40%. Life expectancy for a working-class adult was barely 40 years old. The cities were supposedly choked with smog, raw sewage, and disease. So I ask you, as an engineer looking at a biological production line, if your factories are toxic, if 40% of your product fails before leaving the assembly line, and if your workers are dying at age 40, how do you double your global inventory in a fraction of the time it took to create it? You don't. It is a mathematical impossibility based on natural reproduction alone. Exponential growth requires an exponential catalyst. Unless the population wasn't born. Unless they were imported. In 1854, the United States government initiated a logistical operation so massive and so bizarre that it has been quietly shuffled to the back of the history books. They called it the Orphan Trains.
Let us look at the official data for the Orphan Trains. Between 1854 and 1929, an estimated 250,000 children were loaded onto trains in eastern cities like New York and Boston and shipped to the American Midwest. 250,000 children. Let that number sink in. The historical narrative claims these were street urchins, the tragic byproduct of poverty and immigration. The Children's Aid Society, they say, was simply finding them good Christian homes on farms. Charity. That is the label they slap on a logistical operation that rivals modern military deployments. As an auditor, I don't look at the tiers. I look at the supply chain. Where do 250,000 parentless children suddenly come from? Even with high mortality rates, for a localized area to produce that many untethered, undocumented youths in a concentrated window of time, it requires a catastrophic event. A war, a plague that somehow only targets adults. But there is no record of such an event in New York in 1850. Now, look at the archival photographs of these orphans. They are not starving, disease-ridden street urchins dressed in rags. They are scrubbed clean. They are wearing perfectly tailored, identical suits and dresses. Their hair is meticulously styled. This was not a rescue mission. It was a deployment. They were shipping a blank slate population into the empty, inherited infrastructure of the West. Children have no memory of the old world. Children do not ask who built the massive stone courthouses in their new, muddy farm towns. They simply accept the new narrative. They grow up, they breed, they become the new baseline. But the orphan trains were only the distribution network. Every distribution network requires a manufacturing plant.
Let us move to 1898, the Trans-Mississippi Exposition in Omaha, or the Pan-American Exposition in Buffalo in 1901. The Great World's Fairs. These were the ultimate showcases of the new age. Giant neoclassical palaces of plaster and glass. They displayed the cutting edge of industrial technology. The first massive electric dynamos, wireless telegraphy, the X-ray machine. And right next to the dynamos was the most profitable and most disturbing exhibit of them all: the infant incubators. The official history tells us a man named Martin Couney set up these exhibits to save premature babies because hospitals wouldn't buy the technology. Millions of people paid 25 cents to walk through a grand pavilion and stare at rows of living human infants housed in steel and glass machines. Does that sound like a hospital to you? Or does it sound like an acclimatization process for the masses? Look at the photographs of the incubator pavilions. They do not look like medical wards. They look like factories. Rows of identical steel boxes, heavy industrial piping, uniformed nurses operating like assembly line technicians. And the numbers, the metrics are terrifying. Couney claimed to have treated over 8,000 infants across multiple fairs over 40 years. Where were the parents? Why were these children never claimed? Why were they transported across the country to be displayed as technological marvels next to agricultural machinery? Because they were not a medical anomaly. They were the product. The world's fairs were not just amusement parks. They were the indoctrination centers of the new reset. They were conditioning the surviving population to accept that human life could be and was being industrially generated. Mass production of the new workforce, grown in glass, shipped by rail.
But this creates a mathematical deficit. If you are importing hundreds of thousands of children and manufacturing infants to populate a reset world, what do you do with the remnants of the old population? What do you do with the adults who remember? The ones who know the history books are a fabrication. You build the asylums. Look at the architectural timeline of the mid-19th century. Simultaneously, across the United States, Europe, and Australia, massive palatial structures were constructed. They were called the Kirkbride Asylums. These were not clinics. These were sprawling Gothic fortresses of stone and brick, spanning hundreds of acres. Some were over a mile long from wing to wing, built to house thousands of inmates each. And they appeared overnight, in the 1850s and 60s. We are told there was a sudden epidemic of mental illness. I ask you to look at the historical admission records. People, mostly adults, were committed for novel reading, overstudy of religion, political excitement, grief, hard study. These are not medical diagnoses. These are the symptoms of a population experiencing severe cognitive dissonance. These are the markers of people who do not fit the new programmed narrative. The asylums were not hospitals. They were prisons for the obsolete. If you remembered the old world, you were diagnosed with delusions. You were locked behind 3 feet of solid masonry. Your children were put on a train heading west. And the reset was complete.
I am an engineer. I deal in supply chains. And a human supply chain of the 19th century is broken. The math is a physical and biological impossibility. Empty cities captured on glass plates. 250,000 nameless orphans shipped like freight. Human infants displayed as industrial achievements, and massive stone fortresses built to warehouse the adults
who asked too many questions. They didn't just inherit the architecture. They engineered the society that would live in it. We look at these grand, impossible buildings and wonder how our ancestors built them with horse and buggy. The terrifying truth is, they didn't. We are the orphans. We are the products of the incubator. We are the inheritors of an empire we do not understand, living inside a history we did not write. The data is there. You just have to stop looking at the narrative and start looking at the metrics. This concludes Audit. Subscribe to the Titan Metrics. Until then, question the timeline.